This is the Soul-Filled Sisterhood podcast, and I'm your host, Nicole Burgess, licensed marriage and family therapist and an empowerment coach for women. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now here is today's episode. Episode 6. Well, welcome, sisters. I'm so excited about my guest today because I consider Stacey one of my soul sisters. I have known her now for a couple years, and I love not only who she is as a human being, but what she offers to the world. Stacey Horn is a helper, a healer, and releasing some of the labels she has acquired in life, believing they validated her ability to help others. Stacey helps wellness professionals such as therapists, coaches, hypnotists, nutritionists, and trainers recognize their clients in a way that clients feel seen and understood from the very first session. She feels her passion in life is to help professionals move away from labels and any focus on differences, so they become more curious about other people's experience in the world and meet them there. Stacey loves to explore our inner design and helping people understand themselves at a deeper level and learn to deeply understand and connect with the people in their world. She loves working with mothers and daughters at an age that really helps bridge any differences and experience more connection. She's also very passionate about hypnosis as a way to make changes in one's life in a deep and transformational way. Stacey, thank you so much for being on today.
Thanks, Nicole. You almost made me cry.
Oh, I truly mean it. This has been our journey together that, as we've gotten to know each other over the years, has been something that has just really, I think you have inspired me, and we've supported one another through all of our journeys that we're going on and through. And I just really appreciate our friendship.
I feel exactly the same way. This is such a gift to have this conversation and to be able to share it with sisters.
Yes. So I would love if you would share just a little bit more, like what really got you into this work. I know you work a lot with the temperaments, and not many people, I don't think, quite understand what that even means or is. And I would like if you would share that some more with our listeners.
Sure. I'm in several introvert Facebook groups because that's one part of me. That's one expression of me. And I often hear people ascribing some of their expressions and their humanness to, well, that's because I'm an introvert. And sometimes I really get a little stuck because introversion is one expression of who we are, but the temperament is our core and our design of who we are, our original design, if you will. And people are familiar with lots of personality assessments. People are familiar with type, which is 4 letters, which can be useful, but it also can be kind of reductionist. And when we look at temperament, our core, it's the underpinnings of the type. It's about our drives, our urges, and preferences. And when we understand ourselves as this is who I am, it frees us up a little bit differently to offer more to our clients, to offer more to the other people in our world. There's a freedom of recognizing ourselves in our patterns, what drives us, what urges us, as well as when we can begin to see that in other people. And you don't get that with type. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Would you give us like an example of what you mean, like the type,
Sure.
I guess, versus the temperament? Kind of share some of those letters with folks and what they mean.
Sure. So there are 4 temperaments. And this is actually, gosh, this is historic. This shows up really early in the Bible. And I am not a scholar in any way, shape, or form. But the materials that I use, Ray Lincoln is a scholar and a theologian, and he's done incredible research. And this shows up as four faces of humanity very early on in the Bible. So this has been being observed for millennium. But there are four temperaments. The first is SJ, which is senses and driven, I guess, is the way I like to describe it. It's a sense of urgency. And it's someone who is about rules and responsibility and duty and caution. It's about 68% of the people in the world. So this is the bulk of the people who we interact with and um, maybe. One other way is SP, which is people who are sensory as well, but they're a little bit more open and free with their time. And I'll explain the letters individually in a minute. These are people who are about making impact. They're about being individualism, and about image. And they manage and impact people in the world, and that's what drives them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So the other two, one is NT, and NT is someone, we call them the tech temperament. They're off because they often show up in technology, architects. So they're all about the mind. They're very independent, theoretical. They can be pleasant, but they are calm, cool, and collected. And sometimes that's a big thing in relationships where people are wanting someone to be more emotional, but that's not how they're wired. And I see that often when I do work with people about their relationships. Different piece of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an NT is 8% of the people. And then there's NF, which is about um, it's sensitive. It's sensitive through the intuition, which is the N, and it's sensitive through feelings and our own feelings as well as the feelings of other people in making decisions. It's often people in the helping professions. It's only 6% of all the people, and strangely enough, a lot end up as therapists and coaches and hypnotists and other people who are helping people to be the best that they can be. So it's yeah, and I own that one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I understand that. So those are the four types of people that are in the world, and when we can understand people from where they're coming from, recognize them for one of those four people, we can use different language with them. We know what their priorities are. Sometimes they may not be always aware of them,
Mm-hmm.
but if we can figure out who they are, we know what their priorities are, and sometimes can help them get more solid into returning home to their selves.
Yeah. So how is it that you're now then helping, the wellness profession? Like, how are you helping them? Because again, you have done this work for years in the different temperaments, and you really, to me, are like kind of, that's your depth of knowledge, right? That you're able to go, oh yeah, that's so-and-so based off of a hand gesture or not. And so, so how
Yes.
do you help wellness professionals really kind of tune into that?
Well, I think one of the things I've always been aware of is I think human beings always, we go through the world and we kind of think that everyone experiences it in the same way that we do.
Right.
And in one level, that makes really good sense. It's like, well, yeah, of course. Yeah. But the reality is that there are different ways of experiencing it. And often a therapist and helping people, we assume that the people coming to us may have the same motivations for making change in their lives. Sometimes they do,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they don't. But we can be more effective if we recognize their motivations for making change, and we can plug into those and give them the tools, give them the information they need that will help them make the changes that they want to make for themselves. Whether that's losing weight, whether that's changing careers, whatever it might be that they're coming to a professional about, we're more effective, they have better results, and I like to help people solve problems and make changes that they're looking to make. So when I realized how plugging in this information made it more effective for people, it makes sense to me that sharing this information with other helping people, because they also want people to have good results.
Hmm.
So that was where I came to, having gone through this process.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing you say is really that because you actually have this language, you're doing a service for the wellness profession in that sense of helping them gain that awareness of what that language is that their clientele is speaking to them about and where they're coming from. That all of us in this, the wellness profession, the helping profession, is we really do want to serve and we want to help people step into their full potential or take those action steps that they're desiring to take. But we, as you're saying, we have to kind of come more from their perception of things so that we all speak the same language.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that so well. I'm going to have to listen to the recording again so I catch it. Yeah, and it's been difficult for me to find the right words to describe this, because most healing and helping professionals, we're all about understanding ourselves. You
Hmm.
know, we often like personality assessments. We'll do all those things online, you know, and understand ourselves, thinking that helps us help other people, which it does.
Hmm.
But going to the underpinnings of that, going deeper in understanding people, is where we can really help them, make changes in their lives that they're coming to us to make.
And I like how you even described really in your bio that it's really, helping us kind of remove some of the labels that we may have placed on ourselves or society has placed on us or family or culture, whatever is
Hmm.
placed on us, that when we really do first and foremost do our own work, our own reflection, that we are able to then be at a, what do I want to say? I guess a stronger foundation where we can then be with that other person so they can begin to open up their own doors, as we keep saying, is coming back to themselves. Because when we have these other masks on, or we're trying to be something that we are not, or someone that we are not, we're out of alignment. And I always talk about, coming back to your own path, coming back to your own true inner wisdom. And that's really what you're tapping into today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I listened to a podcast this morning, and what I heard her saying was kind of relating some real similar things of not doing the personal growth for someone else.
Yes.
She was talking about that in terms of empaths, and it was like, yep, that's it. Not doing the work that other people need to do for themselves. And I think sometimes in our desire to be helpful, I I know I personally have, and I think many of us do, end up um, getting so excited for people that sometimes we may do some of their work without meaning to.
Yeah. And like what you were talking about earlier, really it's we meet the person right where they are. So, as you're listening to this podcast today, wherever you are is right where you need to be. So it's having that, as what you and I were talking about even before we started to record, Stacey, was that self-acceptance and self-compassion.
Hmm.
That if you are open and willing to step further into getting to know yourself more, to really re-tapping back into your own wisdom, that's when the world really begins to open up. That's when you really are tapping more into your true potential, because you're not living outside of your own truth, your own depth. That you're still learning and you're growing, when you're learning new skills and things. But what we're talking about is really your true makeup, coming from a deep sense inside of you, truly your soul work in all of this.
Yeah, that's funny. I was working with a professional earlier today, and we had some of this conversation, and she was looking at the book that my material that I work based out of. And she kept saying, she's, oh my God. She said, this is blowing my mind to understand myself in these ways. Things I thought I knew about myself have just all shifted and really settled into a new way of being.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's exciting to be able to facilitate that for someone.
Absolutely. And as that facilitator, right, it's also holding the container for them.
Yeah,
So it's really us getting out of our own way sometimes when we
yeah,
get so excited and try to do the work for them. It's like, no, 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 no. That's their path, their path, their path. Let them
yes,
be on their path. And yeah, then it really it shifts relationships all over the board, whether it's your professional relationships, your personal relationships, your relationship with self. All of that can change because you, one, understand yourself better, and two, you really are seeking to understand the temperament of the person that is in front of you, the person that you're having a conversation with, the person that you're working with, so you understand where they're coming from.
yes. And it lights up a curiosity
Yeah.
about how, gee, I don't experience it that way. Tell me how you experience that.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely invitation to someone to speak their truth.
Yeah. That to be able to hold them in that space. And what you're really talking about too is this whole concept of inclusion versus, that separation, us versus them, or
Yeah.
you never understand. It's like, no, that's not true. Sometimes we don't understand one another. And then there's sometimes we have turned off our listening ears. And
Yes.
it's being, like you're saying, it's really staying in that place of curiosity, like, help me understand where you're coming from, who you are, and how you think the way you think.
Yeah. I think right now in our world, unfortunately, most people are looking more and more at differences
Mhm.
and what makes us different and why we're different and those people are different. And I think that's a dangerous place.
Mhm.
Um, Anytime those people become part of the equation. And I think that this gives us a way of looking at our connections and our similarities.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Brene Brown in her most recent book, she talks about that. I think it's Into the Wilderness, right? She talks about how it's really hard to create that separation when you know the person's name, you know their children, you know more about them, that all of a sudden, instead of them becoming an object, right, they really become this human being.
Hmm.
And that's that place of inclusion, that it's
Yeah,
hard to strongly dislike somebody. You may not agree with their concepts or their opinions, but to not come from a place of love, that's
yeah,
that's a hard place to hold on to when you really know somebody.
yeah, yeah. This human experience is a powerful experience when we can see it that way.
Yeah. So what are some of the ways that if people don't quite understand, I know you and I talk about kind of these different temperament tests and things you can take, but what are some of the places that people can actually go to figure out what their temperaments are, or have a better understanding? I know you work with one particular
Yeah,
person that you mentioned
yeah.
earlier.
And the reason I do work with them, his name is raywlincoln.com,
Hmm.
and his his materials, he calls it our inner design. He calls it our inner kinetics, our inner workings, and he does talk about our temperament, the two letters that we have that describe our urges, our preferences, and our drives. And you can go to raywlincoln.com, temperament key, and you can take the assessment online for adults anyway. It takes about 10 minutes and they'll give you that explanation. And like I said, he comes at it from a very different place of looking at our two letters.
Hmm.
So the four letters are actually I, which is, or E, which is how do you restore your battery? By going in, which is introversion, or by connecting with other people. That's extroversion. And you can be a very social introvert. That's
Hmm.
confusing to people, but that's often more about our temperament than it is specifically introvert.
Hmm.
The second is how do you take in information about the world? Is it through your five senses, which is an S, or is it through a sixth sense, which is N, or intuition? And then the third is how do you make decisions? Is it by facts and facts alone? That's T for thinking. Or do you go through that process of ABC, this is what this says to me, and how do I feel about it? It's not either thinking or feeling, it's thinking and then adding, how do I feel about it, or how would other people feel about it? That's how decisions can be made. And then last but not least, Myers-Briggs calls it S and judging and perceiving.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, because everyone does that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more lifestyle preference. Someone with a J goes through the world feeling pressure, always having a sense of time, and likes to make a decision and move on, likes to kind of wrap up the box. And someone who has a P is more open. The clock speaks differently to them. They are a little bit more spontaneous, more laid back. And all of these combinations come together in various forms and fashion. But when we can look at the core of temperament, the NF, the NT, the SP, or SA, then we can see the patterns that we can connect with for both ourselves as well as others. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, it
Okay.
does. Absolutely. And I appreciate you explaining that, because for those who aren't aware of it, then
Yeah.
yeah, that's helpful. And you're right. The way Ray Lincoln explains it is a little different than the Myers-Briggs, but
Yeah.
I love how actually he explains it, because to me, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's partly because of how their materials were developed originally. And Carl Jung also believed that introversion was introversion and extroversion were bigger pieces in who we are than then historically it's been demonstrated,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where their materials came from. So that's why the difference. But yeah, I love his materials. You can see this with your children, you can see this if you're a teacher, you can
Mm-hmm.
see this with coworkers. And yeah, his materials cover all of that really well.
It's like what we're talking about, though, right? It's like really being able to see the world so differently now, because it's through these other temperaments. It's like, oh, that explains so much of why they do this, this, and
Yes.
this. Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
Yes. And that's part of when I founded this. I have a 10-year-old and I'm 55, so you can imagine being 45 and having a child, after being an independent professional for many, many years.
Hmm.
And I wanted to parent her in a way that she could be everything she could be and not make myself crazy,
Hmm.
which is actually how I fell into this, met Ray, fell into this study, began using these materials as, gosh, I think almost 9 years ago. And it made me understand her for who she is, but it also helped me understand, you know, why my mother and I had challenges, because my mother happens to be about as SJ, she's about rules and responsibility and being practical and down to earth and responsible, all
Hmm.
these wonderful things. And I'm made a little bit differently than that. I have a temperament of NF. And so we were speaking different languages.
Yeah.
And so, God, I have such a different appreciation for her,
Hmm.
because now I know where she's coming from. Had I known it when I was young, boy, I want to believe it would have made a big difference.
Right. Yeah. Well, and this is so helpful just to really shed some light on how our temperaments, as we said again, you really impact all of our relationships. It's not just in
Yeah,
one arena of our life, it's in every arena of our
yeah.
life that it does make a difference. And to have that understanding can be so, so helpful.
Oh, it's amazing. It's really fun. When people come to see me, for sessions, often they start talking about relationships, whether it's with their boss, whether it's with their spouse or partner, or their children. And with just a little bit information, I can make some good educated guesses about, is it possible that this person might be coming from this place?
Hmm.
And to see their faces light up, like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet they are. And it begins to shift all of their relationships. It's an amazing thing.
Yes, it is. Very much so. Very much so.
I'm such a geek.
Well, and I love it. I love that you're sharing your geekiness with us. So it's
Yeah.
very helpful. I'm curious, Stacey, over the years, as you've really learned more about yourself, as you've learned more about your daughter and even your mom and the temperaments, what are some of the things that you have done truly as an NF that really helps you take care of yourself? Because again, I know everybody that listens to this, everybody has their own self-care ways. And I'm just curious, what are some of those things for you that have helped you stay more center and not lose all your energy over the years? Or maybe it's something you've learned through the years, like, wow, when I do this, this happens. So let me go and try this method.
Part of it is honoring my introversion.
Yeah.
Um, Being NF, I'm about relationships and connections with people. So my introversion, I love people. I love people one on one or one on two,
Hmm.
even better. Parties, networking events, no, I really don't like those. I have to prepare for those with some quiet time before I go and some quiet time to process afterwards.
Hmm.
So that's one of the ways that I help people understand themselves so that they can use their energy more effectively.
Yeah.
Um, Extroverts draw energy from other people. So inadvertently, someone who's introverted may become very drained by being around extroverts, by being married to one, by having
Hmm.
a 10-year-old who's an extrovert. So being aware of, when I'm starting to feel crabby or irritable, it often means just that my battery's low and I need to take some time out. So that's been one of the most important and easiest ways of taking care of myself. When I find I get frustrated with someone, which fortunately doesn't happen too often, is I automatically now go back to where are they coming from?
Mm.
And kind of connect with, gee, are they coming out of their independence? Are they coming out of the impression that they're trying to make on me? Are they coming out of following the rules and what's their duty? And then I shift and can be present for them in a way that just kind of releases it, releases the tension. And then I can just get curious and delighted with human beings all over again.
Yeah. And I like how you're even saying that, right? There's more of that you're taking the energy and letting it just kind of move past you versus trying to stop it
Yeah.
of like, oh, I've got to change them. It's more like, nope, let me just stay in that curious place and that energy can just flow and yeah, not be a blocker.
Yeah. I've been a social worker by discipline for 27 years, and I've done work that was deep in darkness. I worked with people who were very dangerous for many years, people who were very mentally ill,
Mm-hmm.
chronically mentally ill without who weren't getting treatment or weren't getting proper treatment. So this has helped me move. I've moved away from that work
Mm-hmm.
because I've always believed in the goodness of people.
Mm-hmm.
And while I could see it in those people, it took different energy for me to do that work.
Yeah.
So this work is about helping people understand themselves so they can be better. It's deep, it's complicated, it's simple, and it excites me, obviously, um, to um, to do this. So doing more of what excites me is another big way of how I've shifted to take care of myself.
Yeah. And so much of what you're talking about is really for all of the women who are listening is again stepping back into giving themselves permission to
Yeah,
be who they are, to take
yeah,
care of themselves in the way that really does recharge their battery, that it's what works for them,
yeah.
not for what they think people say they need to do or not do. It's like, no, tapping into yourself, what does work for you and doing more of that.
One example of that is for someone who's intuitive feeling NF, we're pretty, again, 6%
Mhm.
of all the people. And we often grow up being told that we're too sensitive and it's just our imagination. And so it's really invalidating.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something wrong with me.
Yep.
So that's, a piece of self-compassion and becoming aware that, oh, maybe there's not anything wrong with me. I just experience it differently. That's some real freedom that's come with that.
Yeah, very much so. And as you were sharing that, I mean, man, I can remember some of those comments when I was growing up. It's you're too quiet or you get too loud or
Yeah.
you're too into whatever topic,
Yeah.
right? And now I'm like, yes, I am. And it's
Hmm.
more of that true acceptance. And I've had, younger clients when I've worked with them in the past, and some of you, my teen clients, and I giggle when they do this, but they're like, Nicole, you're weird. And I'm like, thank you so much, because
Yes.
I
Yeah.
just really embrace that. I think we're all a little weird on some level, but it's like
Yeah.
instead of labeling or sticking that label on ourselves, like we're
Yeah.
too this and trying to shrink into fitting to that. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, beautiful. That's, if I want to accept it, I can. And if I don't, I just let it bounce off of me and
Yeah.
you go from there.
Well, I think for women in business as well, in particular introverted women in business, most of the consultants out there, not all of them, there's a lot more introverted consultants now, but telling people how to be a coach or be a healer or be
Mm-hmm.
and you have to do it by going to networking and you have
Yeah.
to do sales and all these very external, masculine, extroverted ways of doing business
Yes.
that don't fit for someone who's not that.
Yeah.
So that's really wonderful to help people recognize for themselves that, yeah, I went through business coaching and thought, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I
Yeah.
make this work? Well, because it wasn't for me.
Right. Yeah.
And that's another piece that hopefully your audience will find, what's true for them as they return home to themselves.
Yeah, because there is as introverts, we definitely still market, we still do sales. It's just done differently. And when we
Yeah,
step back into our power, again, there's the alignment, the energy flows so much easier. And then the clientele come because you're in this space of you're in that flow, you're in that ease
yeah,
versus trying to be something that you're not. And when we're incongruent, that's when we get a lot of things that get stuck. So,
yeah,
yeah, I love
yeah.
that.
Amazingly enough, often NF people and introverts are people who are when they see themselves on my website, they
Mhm.
recognize it, and that's who mostly come.
Yeah. So if you
Um,
wouldn't mind, that's a great segue. Share with folks who are listening, what is your website? And again, I'll have that in the show notes for people to go to. But what is your website?
it's it is Stacey Stacey Horn HORN.com.
Excellent. And I
Yeah,
know you shared with me that if people contact you and they tell you that they heard you on this episode today, the Soul Filled Sisterhood podcast, that you will actually give them a discount off of the session.
exactly. Yes, yes,
Awesome. Well, I will put that in the
yeah.
notes as well. And Stacey, I just want to say thank you so much for being on today. I so appreciate your sharing your knowledge and how you are helping other wellness professionals really connect with their clientele, but also themselves, and how we can do that with all of our relationships that we're in. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited about your new podcast, and I'm really honored to have been invited to share on it. And as always, to connect with you. You've been such a gift in my life and helping me in your special ways of being able to help people. And it's made a big difference in my business as well as personally. So thank you. It's fun to have this relationship with you.
Oh, well, thank you, Stacey. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it helpful or inspirational or even encouraging wherever you are right now in your life. If you know of another woman who may find this podcast inspirational or encouraging, please pass this along to her. I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen. Until next time, take care.